Today on Locked On Red Wings, Detroit loses both games this weekend as they are reeling post-trade deadline.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I am a podcast producer for the Daily J, a WWJ News Radio podcast. Well, Scotty's a host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And to begin with, yes, the Red Wings lost 4-1 and then 3-1 in back-to-back games on Saturday and Sunday to the New York Islanders and the Philadelphia Flyers. No, that will not be the bulk of our episode because one, I think it's more important to cover the trade deadline and the implications behind the trade deadline and what it has on this team. But also, both those games were kind of snooze fests at the same time, if I'm being blunt.
They were the same game.
Back-to-back nights.
It was the exact same game. You could have copy and pasted the exact same stats and performance and then just switched out the jerseys of the opponent, and you would have gotten the gist of both games.
Yeah, so we will cover it briefly, probably in segment 3, but we are going to bring you mostly here this episode our reactions to what was left of the trade deadline, that being Friday itself. Scotty, do you want to lead us off and lead us into whatever top trade you want to talk about?
Yeah, we can start with Vrana. I think that was a super, I guess, emotional is probably the word for a lot of fans. And of the deals that happened on the deadline itself, like on Friday, that one is probably the most noteworthy. I think the big theme for that one is just we don't know what we don't know, man. In a vacuum, is a 7th round pick worth like not taking a risk, not even a risk, but not seeing if Vrana can reach his ceiling? No, like obviously not. But this is a dude that literally cleared waivers earlier this season. I say it all the time. Value is determined by market. Clearly, there was not a very big market for him. Because, again, he literally cleared waivers this season. So, and you had to retain part of his salary just to even get the 7th. This is really, again, this is just a situation of we don't know what we don't know. Clearly, this was a to some extent, who knows what extent, we'll probably never know, but to some extent, a fractured relationship between player and organization. And he is... Yzerman said it in the press conference. It's probably was just time to move on for both parties, and that's what he did. So it sucks. I hate it, but also, when you look at it, at least try to look at it a little more objectively. I think that if this truly was Vrana, he was never going to stay here long term. They were going to work out a buyout in the offseason anyway. Then you had to do this, and it sucks, but we don't know what's happening off the ice. We haven't all season. We probably, again, will never know, and that's just kind of where we stand. So the value was not an issue for the return. It's just, it sucks.
Yeah, I know people were upset at the return, but as you said, Scotty, he passed through waivers, and nobody wanted him for free. At his cap hit, at least, which was over $4 million. And so the Red Wings had to make a choice to retain, and they did. And by doing so, they were able to get a 7th round pick and Dylan McLaughlin in return. And I know people are going to be upset that return's not enough. And, to an extent, I understand that. And you said it yourself, like, this is a lose-lose situation for the Detroit Red Wings because Jakub Vrana, it's a really unfortunate and honestly a sad story of a guy with tons and tons of potential, but clearly there's something going on off the ice that nobody could have predicted. And it impacted his play and ended up, whatever is going on, it ended up fracturing the relationship with the front office. And if it was just the best time and best case scenario for him to move on to a new organization. And like Yzerman said during the presser, you wish for hope and hope for nothing but the best for Vrana, because he's a guy who he's a 30, 40 goal scorer potential, and he's got insane ability to snipe, insane ability to shoot, and insane ability to pass. Like, he's got so much going for him. So you just hope for nothing but the best. But unfortunately, his value as it was exactly what you got. And, you are almost, you talk about this kind of a lose-lose because you're losing out on this phenomenal player, but you just couldn't stay healthy for one reason or the other. And again, we're never going to go into what that is because we'll never know for sure. And it's not our place to dig into that part of his life. That would be disrespectful. Again, I reiterate, we just hope that he can perform with St. Louis and get his career on the right track. But the silver lining to all this is that you were able to get anything in return, because what's the alternative, Scotty? What if you don't trade him at the deadline? What are you going to do?
A buyout that costs you even more money than what you retained.
Yeah. And because that was reports a long time ago. And that's the other thing, is we've been getting reports throughout the season, and a lot of them we knew. No is not the right word. They were coming from reputable sources.
Yeah.
They were speculating, and they were coming from reputable sources, though. But because it was such a dire situation, a sensitive situation.
It was fluid, too.
It was fluid. At one point, he
was
was never going to play again, and then he did.
Right. Situation was changing, it seemed like, daily. And because we were so kept in the dark with all of it, it's tough to report on.
So, we took the reports that the Red Wings would look at a trade, and we took the reports they were looking at a buyout, and that the relationship was fractured. We took it all with a giant grain of salt, and I would do it all again because of the fact that, this is a guy that it was such a complex situation, and like you said, fluid. I didn't want to fuel into that speculation. Now, a lot of it ended up being true. I believe at this point that the Red Wings were going to look for a buyout. That's probably part of the reason why another reason why his value was so low.
Yeah.
Because the other teams knew, it's like, why would we want to give you anything in return when I know you're going to just buy him at the end of the season? The silver lining to this is now you're only paying him $2.6 million for 1 year instead of a buyout, because with 1 year left on his deal, a buyout would be a 2-year at 50% of his salary, because it halves the amount of money but doubles the amount of time you're paying it. Where this way you're only paying half that salary for the 1 year because you retained 50%. So that's the silver lining here, is you got out from underneath this relationship that unfortunately didn't work. And again, I really hope that he thrives in St. Louis and gets right back on right track. But you've washed your hands of the situation. And honestly, we'll talk about this after the Oskar Sundqvist trade, but if you look at that Anthony Mantha trade overall, it's still not a bad deal. You're still kind of coming out, in my opinion, ahead. But a lot of that remains to be seen, too, because you're hoping a lot of draft picks work out. But there's one crucial player who's playing on the Red Wings now that is a ripple effect of that Anthony Mantha trade. Scotty, I know that there's not a lot to break down with the Oskar Sundqvist stuff. Do you want to talk about that right away? Or do you want to
do that right now just before the break, because that's a relatively quick one. I thought this was relatively solid value. If you're looking at when I was going into the deadline, what would have been my best and worst case scenario for Sundqvist, I think the peak value we could have gotten back, in my head at least, was a third rounder, but obviously for a playoff team that's buying, so a late third, and we ended up getting a fourth. That's not too terribly far off. So yeah, I'm pretty pleased with it. He's a versatile dude, obviously a friend of the program. We love Sonny.
We love Sonny.
But yeah, he's going to bring a lot of versatility to a team and a lot of size to a team. So happy that he gets to play some meaningful hockey down the stretch. I am totally fine with the return. I don't have too much else to say. A fourth rounder is, I think, pretty accurate value.
Yes, I agree. I know,
and another UFA, obviously, to be. So, makes sense.
I know Max Boltman said that he was a little underwhelmed. I think that might have been the term he used, but he thought maybe he could net more. But I thought that was right around the range I would have expected and hoped to get for Oskar Sundqvist, a fourth rounder for a guy who's just a depth forward, pending UFA, again, winger, deepest position in hockey, but can play both power play and penalty kill. I mean, that's fair value for a guy who's going to be getting 10 minutes a night with the Minnesota Wild. I think that's fair. So yeah, I was pretty pleased with that. But he again was part of that ripple effect, and that fourth round pick again was part of that ripple effect. You got Pack in the Anthony Mantha deal. So when we come back, I'll update you on the Anthony Mantha trade tree. Wow. Oh, what just happened? I don't know. But also we'll talk about the James Van Riemsdyk almost trade to Detroit and why or why not that made sense. And then guys that stayed that maybe could have had value and what that says that they're still here. And then, of course, segment 3, game recaps. I don't want to do it. You
sounded so happy about that.
Because I'm not. But I am happy about today's sponsor, Athletic Greens. Our next partner is a product you got to use literally every day. Start taking AG1 because with one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food-sourced superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging, all the things. Start taking AG1 because it's lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, and contains less than 1 gram of sugar, while costing you just $3, not even just, less than $3 a day. You're investing in health, and it's cheaper than that cold brew habit. You're investing in an all-in-one nutritional insurance, and it's got over 7,000 5-star reviews. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just 1 scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, it is time to upgrade and update the Anthony Mantha trade tree. I remember how shocking and invigorating it was when Steve Yzerman traded Anthony Mantha back in 2021. Remember, just that offseason, he had signed him to an extension, kind of a prove-it deal extension, but an extension nonetheless. So you thought he was here for a few more years. Then at the last minute of the deadline, right as the bell was about to ring, he trades him to Washington for Jakub Vrana, their first and their second-round pick. The first-round pick was for 2021, and the second-round pick was for 2022. Here's how things have shaken out since then. Oh, and Richard Panik. I always forget Richard Panik. I keep forgetting Richard Panik.
Dog.
Well, because he was here for so short of amount of a time, and then they traded him immediately. For some reason,
you keep trying to justify your Panik disrespect, dude. All right, we all see what's going on here.
I'm panicking.
That was you're so ridiculous.
So okay, here's how. So obviously, we know we got Jakub Vrana. That first round draft pick you got from Washington, you used to put in a package to trade up in the first round in 2021, and you drafted Sebastian Cossa. That 2022 draft pick for the second round became Dmitry Buchnilikov, who is an overaged forward, but really a late bloomer, blossoming in the VML in Russia, one of the lower tiers in Russia. He's got a high ceiling, but he's also got a pretty low floor. Definitely one of those gambles, but could be a dynamic guy if he pans out.
A lot of non-first round picks. That's kind of what you're looking for, right?
Yeah. He could late bloomer you're looking for, absolutely. Richard Panik, you ended up trading to St. Louis and got Nick Leddy in return. St. Louis in a second round pick. You retained $1.375 million, which is the final year of that retention this season. So it'll be gone after this year. So then you have Nick Leddy now. Well, then you flip Nick Leddy to St. Louis and Luke Witkowski in return for Jake Wallman, Oskar Sundqvist, and a second round pick. That second round pick is for this year. Jake Wallman, number 2 defenseman on the Red Wings, just signed to an extension. Oskar Sundqvist, you then traded to Minnesota for a 4th round pick this season. And then Jakub Vrana, you ended up dealing to St. Louis this season for a 7th round pick and Dylan McLaughlin while retaining $2.625 million. So all in all, by trading Anthony Mantha away, you've got Sebastian Costa, Dmitry Buchnikoff, Jakub Vrana, a 2023 second round pick, a 2023 fourth round pick, a 2025 seventh round pick, Dylan McLaughlin, and then you have about $4 million in dead cap with 1.3 of that expiring at the end of this season. I would still do that deal today because there's a lot of potential in those picks. And obviously Jake Wallman is become immediately a pivotal part of this team's core as it stands.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway from that when you update the tree like that is just that even though the Vrana thing didn't work out like we expected it to, obviously, I still think that is really, really good value for Anthony Mantha. And I still think today, if you asked me to go back in time and would I make the exact same deal, yes or no, would I still pull trig on that deal? 100%.
Well, especially when you look at Anthony Mantha's body of work since that trade. Jakub Vrana, despite his off-ice troubles and his injuries, had 20-some points in 40 games played with the Red Wings, something like along those lines. He was about a half point per game. Mantha had the same level of production in almost 100 games. In over 100 games with the Washington Capitals, he has just over 40 points. The level of production from Anthony Mantha isn't nearly as good as Red Wings had hoped he would become with Detroit.
Well, yeah, it's also not like in the first half of that season he was setting the world on fire either. So, like,
he's had a ton of injury issues himself. So, I would still do that deal, especially because you're paying him like what, $5 million a season? Yeah, $5.7 million is how much Anthony Mantha's making. So I'd still say that deal, and there's still a lot of what ifs going on, a lot of draft picks, a lot of prospects, but just Jake Wallman on his own, who has become such an impact player on this roster. That's good stuff.
Completely agree. I think like pivoting now from that, unless you have anything else you want to say, pivoting from that to players that are still on the roster that is surprised the right word? That are still on the roster?
A little surprised.
The only one that genuinely surprised is the right word, is Pius Suter. That's the only one that
Haig, Osterley.
Yeah, well, how much of a market, right? Like that at the end of the day, like if you're not even getting a 7th rounder for some of the dudes, then like you might as well just keep them. But yeah, I think Suter's the only one that really I thought had legitimate value and a legitimate market to playoff teams. And he's been really good the last like month and a half. We've talked about it a lot on the show in game recaps and such. He plays really good defense, as you've talked about a lot before. And yeah, like that one really did kind of surprise me. I was expecting somewhere around whatever we were going to get for Sundqvist was probably around, maybe even a little bit more, to be honest, is because Suter can play, 4C, I guess, on a playoff team if you really need him to. But I that one was the only one that really surprised me. And I think I want to throw back to you then, if he obviously, I guess, not if, he did not get traded, does that somewhat imply extension, or is that just we didn't find a deal, so we just hung on to him?
I would like to believe, which is crazy because you said it's a surprise he didn't get traded, and I was going to rebuttal with actually kind of a pleasant surprise. Because
I don't mind that.
Earlier in the season, we were talking about how, he was underperforming for what he had done last season. But this season, like you had pointed out, and I won't go down the same road you already pointed out, but defensively very good, penalty kill specialist, has been on fire recently. I was thinking the other day, I'm like, I kind of wouldn't mind keeping him around on another short-term deal if he's willing to sign a short-term deal, because he's been a pleasant surprise, and I am open to the idea. And so I would hope that by not dealing him, maybe it's an Olli Maatta situation. Maybe that there is a little bit of a deal in place to extend him for another 2, maybe 3 years, because he's a good depth forward who's capable of playing
turnaround.
really good defense.
What a turnaround, man. We were talking about him being like potentially healthy or like on the outside looking in going into the season. And he's had a really productive year. And yeah, especially for a low AAV, I don't think anyone would be mad at him as a depth bottom six forward for the foreseeable future. And then as the team gets better, he just moves lower and lower into the lineup.
Yeah, because Marco Casper's not right around the corner. It's going to take a couple more years, so you're going to still have to fill out a lineup. And I hate to tell you guys, but the UFA pool this offseason isn't looking great.
Yeah,
so
it's not as deep as last year for sure.
Not nearly as deep. It's like you're in the kiddie pool this year. But we can take a quick break, and when we come back, we can talk about the James Van Riemsdyk thing. Other news and notes. Red Wings made a couple signings after the deadline, and then briefly break down the back-to-back losses. And I mean briefly. I mean like, hey, they lost. All right, see you tomorrow. But first, I got to talk to you guys today about Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, then you've got to try Built Bar. We just got through the holidays. We just got through the trade deadline, the NBA All-Star game. We got through a lot recently. But one thing is constant: the desire to get swole. And Built Bar is going to help you do that. Don't you love it when I ad-lib, Scotty?
Nothing better, man.
But seriously, in all seriousness, ad-libbing aside, stop. Scotty's killing me. In all seriousness, Built Bar is delicious. And Scotty, they've been kind enough to send us Built Bars to try. I have not found one that I've disliked. All of them I have liked. And the puffs especially are bangers. They're so good. And we talk all the time about the cookie dough puff. That one's really good. The ones right here they're talking about, the churro, peanut butter brownie, those two are really, really good as well. But that's also because I love brownie and I love peanut butter. And who doesn't like churro? I mean, the fact that they can encapsulate those flavors into a Built Bar is unfair, especially when you take into account, Scotty, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. They're only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and 17.
Have you tried the churro yet, dude?
No, I honestly have not.
I'm going to keep bothering you until you do, because it changed my life. So
it changed your life?
Yes.
Like mental problems gone. Now I'm just good to go.
There is a time in my life before I tried a churro Built Bar, and then there's the better part of my life.
It's like how we separate our years, BC and AC.
Correct.
Or wait, 100%. That's not right.
It's AD, but
AD, yeah. ACDC.
AC is like in your house, like cool, rooms down, dude.
All right, well, let me move on before I butcher this more. Go to Walmart. Go to Sam's Club. You can get a 4-bar box at Walmart. You get a 13-bar box at Sam's Club. And you can always go to Built.com. Check them out. You won't regret it. Segment 3, Lockdown Red Wings podcast. All right, Scotty. James Van Riemsdyk. What the hell was going on there? That was an exciting last 15 minutes of the deadline.
I think we should retire his number. I think he might be my favorite Red Wing ever.
Didn't even get a number. He wasn't here long enough.
He might be my favorite wing ever. Do like what they do, like what the Tigers do with Ty Cobb. He didn't have a number, so they just have the name Cobb just on like the back wall. Just put JVR on a jersey and just take it into the rafters. What a great 45 minutes the Van Riemsdyk era was for the Red Wings.
It wasn't even 45 minutes.
Crazy.
It was 5 minutes.
Well, yeah, I guess. The whole saga of his entire market, I guess, was 45 minutes. The Red Wings part alone was, like 10 or 15. It was wild. I guess I want to talk about why that was even, like, remotely a thing at any point. And I think there's a lot of speculations and, like trying to draw up game plans as to why. But it really is fascinating because it was just totally out of left field. And I think the assumption was like turn him around and flip him right away or just like eat all of the salary maybe. I mean, he's a UFA. Like I don't know. I can't imagine that was maybe too much of it, but I don't know. It was a really weird 15, 20 minutes.
What was strange about it is it makes no sense. I mean, you've been selling all day long and then you're going to turn around and buy a pending UFA winger with $7 million cap hit. And like, there was tons of things that people were, tons of speculation flying. We still don't know the legitimate reason as to why Yzerman would be in on Van Riemsdyk. And not that like his contract's expiring. So the $7 million part doesn't really matter because you can eat it. It's fine. But some people were saying you would turn around and then retain salary and trade him. You can't do that. You only have 3 salary retention spots, and they're all used on Bertuzzi, Vrana, and Panic. Okay, well, then you talk, okay, well, maybe you like him and you want to get a jump on free agency, so you acquire him at the deadline and then extend him at a cheaper market because he brings like grit and like half point per game style, and you need to fill out a lineup. So maybe you're doing this to just get a jump on the offseason. That's somewhat plausible, I suppose. I don't know if Yzerman's targeting him to keep, because the other thing is the idea was that you were going to get the Flyers to retain 50% of the salary because they still had a spot available. And then you flip him to an in-division rival who wanted him. And because they're getting him at a discounted price, they're going to give you more in return. But the problem with that theory is it would have to have taken place in less than 15 minutes. Unless, and I guess this is possible, that mystery team had already talked to Detroit and is like, hey, if you get Van Riemsdyk at 50%, we'll give you this for it. And it was like a pre-established agreement that the Flyers found out about, and so they got cold feet and pulled out. I don't know. This is all speculation, because my reaction was, what the hell? Why are we in on this? Either way, I had a fun graphic made up because we had been selling all day long, and they all said, thank you, Sonny. Thank you, Vrana. I was really pumped to write welcome JVR on a graphic. I'm not going to lie. I got a little bit excited.
You should have done a thank you JVR and tweeted it out when it fell through.
Yes. Oh my God, I missed it. Oh, I missed the opportunity. Have you ever seen those YouTube videos when players are like,
yeah, they're the funniest things ever, dude.
Where they're like part of the 3-way trade. And so like, this is the conduit team. Like Patrick Kane, for example, got traded to Arizona, to the Rangers.
Right.
And so he was with the Coyotes for like a split second, and people will like make a YouTube video.
Dude,
be like, Patrick Kane highlights.
The Coyotes salary is like 50%.
57% dead cap.
We're taking them seriously?
That's cap. Insane, that's cap circumvention on the opposite side of things, because we talk about how, like, for example, what team did Bruins just put Taylor Hall on the IR, right. And it's like, oh, I wonder who's going to be healthy just in time for playoffs.
Correct. Yeah.
So that because there's no salary cap in the playoffs. The Lightning did it with Kucherov. So
the Lightning did it a lot with a lot of people.
Well, the Golden Knights did it too with Stone, I believe.
Correct, yeah.
But this is the opposite of that. That's literally taking on retired players to get to the cap floor while icing a crap team to try and win the lottery. That's just as bad, in my opinion.
It's nuts. It really is.
They have a lineup full of guys who haven't played in years.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But that's neither here nor there. News and notes. Alex Chasen. Good Lord.
Dude,
Alex
really?
Chasen. I'm never going to get that. Alex Chasen signed to a 1-year deal prorated. He was playing with Grand Rapids all season long. He's about 20 points with Grand Rapids. Actually, exactly 20 points with Grand Rapids in 29 games played. Played with Vancouver last year. He is the source of the Fabry Bertuzzi laughing meme that spawned last year. In Vancouver, he had 67 games played, 22 points, 13 goals, 9 assists. Red Wings need to fill a lineup after trading away a bunch of players. They signed him to an NHL contract. They also signed John Lethaman. I believe that's how it's pronounced, from the Toledo Walleye to I believe it's a 2-way contract.
Shout out the Toledo Walleye, by the way. 13 straight dubs at the time.
Sebastian Kosa, 1-0 shutout tonight. He's been great.
13 straight dubs. Yeah, Kosa's in net for a lot of those games, too.
Yeah, Lethaman, .927 save percentage with the Toledo Walleye. .902 save percentage with the Grand Rapids Griffins. I believe that signing was made because Nedeljkovic had to be an emergency call-up and they needed a goalie.
Correct, yeah.
So that's the news and notes, guys. Red Wings recap, Scotty. Take it away.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, genuinely, it was like watching the same game twice. Like, you got outplayed by both teams for almost the entire game. Sunday's game against Philly, you got heavily outplayed the first 10 minutes, and then you scored, and then it was like it kind of evened out, and then you got outplayed pretty significantly for the last 40. And then Saturday's game against the Islanders was really no different. Like, you took a 1-0 lead, even though you were getting pretty heavily outplayed, and then it caught up to you, and you you ended up the result that you probably deserved, I guess is the word. So, yeah, I mean, tough. tough. It really was like watching the same game twice, just against a different opponent. So I feel a lot better about kind of mixing the 2-game recaps together just because of how similar in nature they were. But I don't know if the team. I mean, look, at the end of the day, whether we're still riding with like what Yzerman did, and I personally agree with everything he did at the deadline and stuff, and I'm
You don't
fine
have
with
to
the
like
value,
it,
but
but it was the right move.
your right, but your GM literally came out and said this is not a playoff team. Like before these 2 games, like I'd imagine that's a little bit maybe more difficult to get the motor going and get ready to go out on the ice every night. But it was not great. You got outplayed pretty much for 120 minutes this weekend.
Yep, absolutely. I agree with you. I mean, if you want to point out a couple of the good things, and there's like
Zadina
3.
against the Islanders.
Zadina against the Islanders, then getting the promotion to the top line where he didn't look
He
bad.
didn't look out of place. I mean, the whole team
The
kind
whole
of
team
looked
looked
not
bad.
great, so he kind of just mixed in with the rest of the team there. But he looked different than the rest of the team on Saturday. He genuinely looked
Yes.
really good. So.
And he was part of that 2018 line, as people are dubbing it. They're all 2018 draft picks.
Yeah.
Yzerman or Holland's last draft class. Go figure.
There you go.
Jonathan Berggren, Joe Veleno, and Philip Zadina, for 2 firsts and a second-round pick, all pairing up on the line, and they looked great. Zadina got the bump to the top line. He was 4th on the team in expected goals for percentage in the game against Philly as a top line man, 10% relative over his teammates. So even relative to his teammates, he was a positive. But again, you take that with a huge grain of salt in a game where no one had over 50%. So it's like, okay, good. You were one of the better players on an entire team that played like garbage. And that's the whole crux of the situation is the team's crushed, man. They're absolutely crushed right now. You can tell. I mean, they had 2 pivotal games in Ottawa. They lost them in horrible fashions. And that, like Yzerman said in the post-deadline media availability, I mean, it didn't make his decision up, but it reaffirmed him in his beliefs. He said those losses to Ottawa were the closest thing the Red Wings had to playoff games since 2016, and they got killed. It reaffirmed that this team is not a playoff team. And so he said that he would have still made the necessary moves, like Bertuzzi is what he's probably alluding to. But he said if they hadn't lost those games, he might have not traded some of the other guys. And so the team was crushed. They looked unmotivated in both of these games because they held their destiny in their hands and they lost it. So now they're reeling. That's 6 straight losses. Larkin had a goal. Perron had a goal. Cool. You've scored 2 goals in 2 games while giving up 4 goals and 3 goals. If you look at the games they've played, it was 3 goals against, 6 goals against, 6 goals against, 5 goals against, 4 goals against, 3 goals against. That's a lot of goals against. You haven't had a game where you've given up less than 2 goals against. And granted, the third one in the Philly game was an empty netter. I understand that. But that's not good. And then it doesn't get much better if you look at the goals for. Like the offense and the defense has completely fallen off. This team is crushed. They're reeling. They're unmotivated.
Yeah, and they were already spiraling before they literally traded, a solid amount of production away from the team on Thursday and Friday. And so, yeah, here we are. I would imagine that it is super hard to get motivated and stuff when you're aware of the direction of the rest of the season. But there's a lot of these dudes, the remaining UFAs are obviously playing for new
Magnus
contracts
Hellberg
and whatnot. And I think later in the season, especially once we get into that like 10 games remaining stretch because of just like service time manipulation and stuff, we could see some youth come up in place. There's still a lot to follow the remainder of the season, but as far as the wins and losses go, I think we're pretty done record watching.
I think this is where we see what Derek Lalonde's made of, because this is on him now to get this team motivated to play games that, let's face it, don't matter. I mean, it matters for earning your next contract and things of that nature, but there's no playoff push happening anymore.
Yeah, it matters for individual performances no longer.
So how do you motivate a team to play tough in that situation? Well, Derek Lalonde's got to figure that out. Goals for, I hinted at it, but goals for in this losing streak is 0, 2, 1, 4 against the Kraken, and then 1 and 1.
Right.
So, outside the Kraken outlier, the team's just not producing offensively or defensively. So Lalonde's it's on him to get this right, because I don't want to watch this type of team every single night for the rest of the season. And I want them is as hot as it would be, as sexy as it would be for them to get Connor Bedard. It's even if they finish 9th or 10th worst in the league, their percentage is like 3 and 5%. So I want to see this team compete and win from here on out the rest of the season, just because I want to see wins. I'm so tired. And this will go into a whole different conversation, so I'll steer clear of it. But I get Connor Bedard as Connor Bedard, and Michkov is Michkov, and Fantilli is Fantilli, and they're all great prospects, Bedard being like the king amongst men. But I don't want to see this team spiral and the wheels to come off like they did last season. I want to see them continue to play tough.
Yeah, that's
and
not
win
where
games.
this team's at in the rebuild. No
play
one
spoiler.
Should. And the selling at the deadline doesn't imply that either, I don't think. Well, we can get into that.
They're just playing like it right now.
Yeah, certainly.
So they've undone all that goodness that they did, and I understand that they're crushed. I get it. I understand it, but it's gotta get turned around. Can't keep watching this product the way it's been. Any final thoughts?
We ball.
We'll be back with a new episode on Tuesday. What are we talking about tomorrow? You had an idea. Give them a little tease for the people.
Yeah, I think it's important like in this episode we talked about the moves that were made specifically and talked about them in a vacuum, but I think I want to take a step back and look at what this deadline means to the big picture and the direction of the team still, because I think there's a lot of varying opinions out there about the direction of the team now after the deadline. And some people think this is like rebuild 2.0 when we sold off a ton of assets, and some people think it's more of a step back for steps forward this offseason and stuff. So I kind of just want to dive into there. I also want to talk about the Toledo Walleye winning 3rd seed straight.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a conversation about what is the core of this hockey team, and how the rebuild's nowhere near complete, even though we're talking about we're building up. Amadeus Lombardi, 40 goals scored. You got Sebastian Cossa, who's been killing it in the ECHL lately. And you got Carter Mazer, who continues to impress with the University of Denver. So still a lot of good going on in the depths of the organization that we're just waiting to see the fruit of that labor. So we'll talk about that tomorrow on Locked On Red Wings. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.
What are you doing?
That was just my 1950s announcer voice. I don't know. I'm having fun.